Hello, everyone. I'm Evelyn Fabiano, Strategy and Marketing Director for Baker Hughes. And please welcome back to our last week of Subsea Connectivity Americas. It's been 3 great weeks with you, and I really appreciate the great experience that you gave it to us during those 3 weeks. And on behalf of all at Baker Hughes, I want to thank you for connecting with us and making this event a great experience. So we continue to see our audience growing, and I really appreciate each one of you that's been connecting every week. So I can see here people from Houston coming back, so thank you very much. And I really appreciate you all coming back with us. Let me see, who else do we have here? Minha pátria amada não desaponta. Muito obrigada a todos do Brasil por estarem aqui novamente. And what else? We have, gracias México, Colombia están acá nuevamente. Muchas gracias, bienvenidos. So before we start our agenda, I really want to recognize that some of our partners, customers, and employees in Louisiana are still getting back on their feet after being hit last week by Hurricane Laura. So I hope you all are safe and well, and my prayers are with you. If you weren't affected and you were able to help or volunteer, please do. In moments like that, we really need to show compassion and strength. And I really hope that things get better soon. So going back to our agenda, today I'm joined by our host, Ben Link. He's our VP of Services and Offshore at Baker Hughes, and Mark Hudginson, Africa Project Manager for BP. So they will discuss today how a smart approach on life of food has been a big positive influence on food economics. So our agenda today will focus on being more proactive than reactive. It's a different approach in services. We'll go over how we're combining this approach, this disruptive approach, with digital solutions and data threads, and how we are managing flow assurance. And we believe that our solutions will provide greater returns for you, less carbon footprint, and a higher production rate. So I can see that we're having a little glitch here with the cameras. So Ben, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So I can see that you're having issues with your camera, but if you just can talk to us and give you an overview of what to expect from today and elaborate a little bit on the elements of Subsea Connect for services, intervention, and technical solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't know what happens to my webcam, but I think now
I can see you now.
So okay, without my background, but that's okay. Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks a lot for joining really our 3rd day of Subsea Connectivity. Really appreciate that a lot of you are taking off the time to really participate for the next hour, and then hopefully in the tech sessions as well. We would like to engage with you on a couple of topics, and we will not only stop this engagement now, we will do that over the next few weeks, months, and years, hopefully. So today's sessions are all focused around existing and mature assets. And the topic is really on how do we get more value out of this significant installed base that is today existing across the globe, and specifically in the Americas region. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars of capital equipment that has been installed or that is sitting in various yards across the region. I think the speed of change for our industry was already getting faster and faster, but now since COVID-19 happened, it further escalated. And in my view, we need to fundamentally change the way we operate as an industry in order to not only survive, but to be sustainable going forward. So I think we're faced with a couple of challenges, and I'd like to share my view, mainly from a services standpoint. So one, I think COVID-19 has shown us that our operations are quite vulnerable. We have a lot of business travel happening. We are very dependent on expats, and it creates 2 challenges for our industry. On the one hand, it costs us a lot of money. Business travel globally contributed somewhere around $1.2 trillion to the global economy, and we are a big part of that. And two, it makes us vulnerable to either weather or pandemic situations like we just experienced. A second challenge we have is around the oil price volatility. We're seeing the cycles between recovery and downturn becoming much faster. And I think what the real need for us here is we need to reduce the cost, we need to increase the productivity, and we need to increase the output from the existing and mature assets. And I believe there's a lot to squeeze out still. I think the lower capex spend that we are seeing across the greenfield projects will lead to an urgent need to offset production depletion, which is somewhere around 30% over the next 10 years. And then climate change. I think the need to reduce carbon emissions is fundamental for the world, for our oil and gas industry, and the future for all of us. Today, the greenhouse emissions of our industry equals roughly to all of the airplanes times 5 in 2019. So a lot of work for us to do as an industry. And then I think the energy transition will pose a lot of challenges. I think it will be disruptive in some places. I think it will change the market structure. I think it will change the value chains and really the preferences of customers. And I'm glad Mark is joining us from BP and maybe gives us a bit of his perspective later on. I strongly believe as an industry, we have the right ideas. We have the ingredients. I think we have the experience to address those challenges. However, I think we need to act very fast. I think we cannot miss our chance to transform. I think we need to change the way we do business. And I think we gotta continue to leverage really the experience of our employees and what is out there in the industry. Now, let me give a few examples on how Baker Hughes and specifically the services business addresses some of those challenges across the life of field, but also the brownfield assets. One, we increase the output on existing and mature assets. We have implemented a few integrated services modules. One of them is related to light well intervention and fluid stimulation. What you can see here is we came together with the legacy Baker Hughes company and the legacy GE Oil and Gas company to execute fluid stimulation and intervention work jointly. Today, in one of our tech sessions, you will hear more about this from Carl and Chelsea, and I really encourage you to join the session. To give you one example, in the Gulf of Mexico, we just completed a campaign, and we were able to increase production by 400%. On the technical side, last week, Raymond Sample talked a lot about the technical solutions and how we are able to deliver 50% lower TOTEX. On the services side, we have a significant regional services footprint, a lot of capabilities and expertise. And what we do there is we repurpose technical capital equipment, we repair, upgrade, and extend the life of existing assets today. This helps to save a lot of money. This helps to be fast, and this also helps to reduce carbon emissions. Another area where we focus on is we collaborate with our customers on really value-focused commercial models. This drives more value and shows better collaboration. To give you a few examples, one is really our availability and obsolescence management contract, where an operator pays a fixed fee and gets a guaranteed outcome, or our outcome-based contracts where an operator pays based on the actual output generated. So two interesting commercial models that we have implemented, and we're in discussions with many customers today. And then lastly, and very close to my heart, is really we need to adopt digital once and for all, not just as a supply chain, not just at an operator level, but as an entire industry. One of our solutions is Engage Subsea, which is a digital platform that drives today a lot of productivity, cost out, and better operational performance. You will see a second tech session today focused on digital, and Alex will talk a little bit more about this, and I really encourage you to join this as well. I'll give you one real example to just maybe bring this topic digital home. Last quarter, we were challenged with one operation where we couldn't get any experienced FSEs into a country. We had two options. One, we could have delayed the operation. It would have cost the operator $12 million of rig downtime, or we could have taken our Engage Subsea remote solution, where we guided an unexperienced FSE remotely with video annotation via satellite to install multiple wellheads. We have done that without NPT, and I think this is just the beginning. Now, I'm personally looking forward to a great dialogue with the operators, a lot of the other service providers, and really anybody that can help us in the industry and outside of the industry to help us address the challenges. I think we have a lot of potential, but we need to continue to challenge the status quo. We need to think beyond the traditional approach, and we need to collaborate and learn from each other. Let's start this dialogue now, and I'm really grateful for Mark to join. BP has been a great partner. BP has challenged us quite a lot as well to help us think differently on some of those topics, and I think we're making some good headwind there. And I really like the vendor-led aftermarket approach that BP is taking. So thanks, Mark, for joining. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Evelyn.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And I'm very excited for today because I've seen the presentations, and it's really interesting after being 15 years in this industry and hearing a lot about digitalization, what we are trying to do, and disruptive models. It's really happening, right? We're really delivering this, and the real examples that we can do this, and how COVID-19 has pushed us to adapt to a new normal and expedite some of those concepts that we are trying to introduce in this industry for so long. So it will be an exciting day for sure. So going back to Mark, thank you very much for being with us today, Mark. So for the people who doesn't know Mark, he specializes in project managing. He manages large deepwater subsea development. He has been in the industry for 19 years with BP in oil and gas, and he has delivered major projects in Angola, Egypt, Azerbaijan, and currently manages a portfolio of deepwater subsea projects in the Africa region. He's also a member of the Global Subsea Systems Leadership Team, which sets the strategy and executes BP subsea projects. So Mark, again, thank you for being with us today. So Ben was talking a little bit about some of the challenges that our industry are facing. Could you just elaborate for us a little bit more on that, on your view?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to talk, Evelyn and Ben. It's a pleasure to work with you and to speak with you today. So that opportunity is very much appreciated. So with respect to challenges in the industry, I think if I think very, very broadly, there's obviously the dual challenge of the world needs more energy, and it continues to grow year on year. But we've also got the challenge of transitioning to a low carbon economy. And so when I think broadly, that's the major challenge, which I think as an industry we're facing. As I then zoom in a little bit more into subsea industry, I see, I guess, what I see predominantly is cost being an issue. So as we go forward, we can see at the moment, we're obviously seeing costs, the outlook of oil and gas prices reducing at the moment, about 30%. BP and others have revised their long-term price assumptions going forward. We've kind of also had high value impairment charges. I know Baker Hughes and BP have both had those as we sort of forecast these lower costs. And as we look at the industry is actually pretty mature now in subsea, but what we're not doing, I guess, is when we look at other industries, we see the cost base coming down, we see improvements coming. If we look at the automotive industry and the aerospace industry as well, in time as those industries mature, we see the cost base coming down. As we look across oil and gas and subsea, we're not quite seeing those at the moment, which I think gives us opportunities to improve, So as an operator in BP, what we see is we are, I don't know if anyone's seen our second quarter results and what we've proposed to the market, but we are making quite large strides with respect to transitioning to low carbon. So what that means for our company as we look at future investments and future costs, we are basically in a competitive environment with the other elements of the business, which includes low carbon, which includes EV charging stations, which includes refining, all these other things. So now subsea is in competition with these. And so again, the oil price dropping, the competition internally, and the industry in general drives a real market to try and reduce the subsea price in order to make us competitive, in order to make the future for both BP, other operators, industry, and the suppliers. I think that's really important. So I guess with respect to reducing costs, there are opportunities. So how do we approach that? What is my kind of view on that? I think standardization is really important. You know, I work in GSS, which stands for Global Subsea Standardization and Solutions. Why is that important? I think as an industry, I think we need to standardize on products to a much greater degree than we have done in the past. As operators, we're used to asking and requiring bespoke solutions because of the field. And if we want to really reduce prices, we need to improve scale. We need to kind of build that industrial size up. So I think there's a huge, as an industry, we need to change. I think the other operators and BP align, we need to kind of converge on the concept standards and work with our suppliers like Baker Hughes and also have a standard product range. And I think that really will affect both the cost and the lead time, which is really important. Also, as Ben talked to before, I'm a strong advocate of supplier-led. I think that will help increase the efficiency of both of our organizations. As we all know, generally what happens is the operator mirrors or man marks the supplier, which takes a lot of our time and effort and puts some sort of level of inefficiency in through all that organization. So I think there's a real opportunity here with COVID, with digitalization, as Ben talked to leverage this situation and really try and go more supplier-led. I think it's really important that we start to work in the supplier systems. I think that avoids duplication and increases efficiency. So when Ben talks to Engage Subsea, I think BP working inside Baker Hughes systems, I think there's going to be a future where that is just the way that business becomes. We do it once, we trust our suppliers to perform, we can see, we can trust and verify what they're doing, and there's no information handover. We can see it as well as Baker Hughes directly in there. So I think that's going to offer some real efficiencies. And again, you can put that across to documentation, planning, reporting, all these other systems we use digitally. I think if we can share these and use them in the supplier forum rather than expending a huge amount of energy transferring data back and forwards, I think that would be really advantageous. Also, as we look to reduce costs at the moment, operators, and I guess we made a move maybe 3 or 4 years ago to rent a lot more equipment than we have done in the past. We've got agendas to go to zero inventory. So that means putting some of that onus back onto the supplier, which I think is the best place for it to be. I mean, as you build, manufacture and construct the equipment, you're the best people to look after it, maintain the spares and then issue along with the tooling and make sure we don't have obsolescence issues and make sure it all comes up. So again, I think there's really areas there where we can work together to reduce costs, which I think is good.
Okay, thank you very much. You touched on a lot of points here and I made some notes here. And it's very interesting that you're saying about the internal competition, right? Because during the evolution of our industry, we could say, oh, maybe operators were like competitors, but then operators became partners in fields, right? And now you have the energy transition and the renewables and all of that inside, all competing for the same capex, right? So it's been really interesting, all the things that you said, and also about the cost. Yes, I think all of us are trying to kind of innovate and trying to bring new commercial models. And Ben was talking about what we are trying to achieve with some of the service and integrated models. It really brings to home. But now we all need to expedite.
Yeah.
So let's start this panel. And we talked about some of our challenges that we are facing today. And I really like the way that both you, Mark, and Ben brought it to light, some of those challenges about the oil demand slowing, the COVID-19. So let's go to the capital constraints, right? We were talking about right now. So Mark, how does BP maximize oil recovery from its valuable assets?
Very good question, and it's changing, though I guess not in concept. What I would say, I guess, is good for all seasons, but I think there's renewed focus and changes in our portfolio and how BP is going to manage. As I said before, and as you commented on, because of this competitive nature for a constrained and sort of capped capital investment, we're going to have to really focus in the right areas. So what we're redoing, we're reevaluating the opportunities we have in the company in our different basins. And we're really going to need to focus on our highest quality basins, such as the Gulf of Mexico. That actually is one of the ones that stands out for BP for many different reasons: good quality asset, good future amounts of oil and gas reserves, and also the tax regime and the way that it's set up there gives us real good advantage. So the Gulf of Mexico is going to be really important for BP Subsea going forward as part of our portfolio. And I guess our approach previously was we've done quite a few very big projects which were exploratory in all corners of the world. I think we're going to see a little bit less of that and more focus on our existing hubs and infrastructure. Clearly, you gain leverage if you've already put the capital investment and invested in that infrastructure. You get a better rate of return if you add into that hub and that existing equipment. So I think in the next couple of years, you'll see a focus towards the GOM, or one of our Met hubs, but I think you will see a focus there. And I think you'll definitely see a focus around existing hubs and developing them and improving them. What's important in that, I guess, is the pace to bring on new production. So I guess I've seen Baker Hughes' bid to execute, and I think that will certainly help. But through our tendering activities, through our delivery, getting that pace from having the concept of the idea all the way to it bringing first oil or first gas, I think is going to become increasingly important to get those rates of returns. I think there's real monetary value in the pace there. And again, standardization, if we already agree what standards are going to be used in the industry, the tendering, the repeatability, and the speed at which they can be brought to bear the products, I think will be a real differentiator in the industry. So we're certainly going to be focusing on that. Maximizing well productivity, we've done some good work with Baker Hughes on light well intervention. The costs there associated relative to working rigs is really favorable, and we've seen some great results and some real increase in productivity on our wells. So again, as we focus on existing assets and hubs and looking at trying to get high value rates of return, light well intervention is going to be an area our wells team is certainly going to be looking and working at. And then applying technology as well. So the technology, it needs to be in the right place. It's not just going to be for the sake of it, but there are some real projects which are under leveraged with respect to pumping and compression. And if we can bring these technologies in the right place at the right time, they unlock a huge amount of value. They bring production earlier, they enhance the reservoir recoveries. And if we bring the compression closer to the wellbore, it's good for the environment as well. It reduces some of the CO2 as well. So we need to find the right projects to do it, but we have got those right projects. And so technology to support that is really going to be fundamental as we go forwards.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that, and we are here for you. So Ben, I would like you to follow up with you. And Mark just said that we did some work with BP for well intervention. So how does BP, how does Baker Hughes is supporting BP, right, and other operators to enhance productivity?
Yeah, so I mean, we partner with BP on multiple regions across the globe. I think what Mark mentioned was light well. This was a campaign we were running in the Gulf of Mexico. We're preparing for the next campaign right now. I think it was a very successful campaign from our point of view. Maybe Mark can add a few comments afterwards, where we are really starting to increase our capabilities, and we have now roughly 30% of the market capability and capacity. And I think the interesting part is we're actually bringing pressure pumping and other parts of the Baker Hughes family into that mix as well. And now you can talk actually about a lot more value instead of just maybe running a light well stack. We also can actually do the well analysis. We can bring in additional scope, and we can then drive more value for the operators. I also mentioned earlier some of these outcome-based contracts. I know they are relatively new to some parts of the industry, but I think with us now having actually a lot more insight and getting a lot more data, these outcome-based contracts will become, I think, will have a big impact to the operators. We are performing actually right now for 2 customers, one in the Gulf and one in the Middle East, an analysis on all of their wells to scope out which are actually the best targets for production enhancement. So I think you kind of combine that with the digital piece, the integrated and the digital model will drive a lot more value. I think then on top of it, we obviously work on larger greenfield projects. One is in the West Africa region, where we had a lot of good dialogue and got some good feedback from BP on how we had to address things, and we're incorporating that as well to really live this vendor-led aftermarket solution. And I think it's just the starting point. I think if everybody adopts that, you can start bringing in scale. You can start taking cost out. You can run really the entire supply chain much leaner, and that's where we all want to get to. And I think it's moving in the right direction. I think a lot more for us to do, but I think the dialogue is at the right place. I don't know, Mark, if you have anything to add.
Yes. So I haven't got a lot to add to Lightwell intervention, but I agree that it has been real value in the Gulf of Mexico. With respect to supplier-led aftermarket, and I think we as a company are going to sort of redefine our interface with our suppliers, and in a view to be more efficient with respect to where we apply our energy and staff, and I say to leverage the skills that the supplier has. So in the past, we have stepped over many times to hopefully support, but sometimes that's slightly questionable. But I think supply-led is really where it should be. You know, we pay companies like Baker Hughes to deliver an end product, an end outturn. They are got the right amount of staff, they've got the right equipment, they've got the right expertise, and we need to trust them to do that. And if we can do that, and as Baker Hughes builds up their organisation and their processes and their portfolios, I think they're really going to be able to perform now. I do think Engage Subsea, a way of, we classically spend a lot of time doing planning work for mobilizations, for equipment, stuff that is really better done with the supplier. It really is your own equipment, your own part numbers, you've got all the engineering resource. So we haven't really done a good job of leveraging that in the past. And in the future, we will do. So our interface with the supplier will shift back, and we will trust them more to do the work which we pay, and they're capable and they've got expertise in doing. So that will take a change in mindset, I think, on both sides. And I think we've both got our heads there, but I think all the way through the organization, we need to kind of keep pushing and reinforcing that to make sure that the behaviors behind that underpin it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the whole piece around digital, right, and providing that visibility, I think is key, right? Because you're going to trust more the supply chain. At the same time, I think we got to make sure that we drive the visibility and have a real open dialogue and open, almost like open books, right, to showcase where the tools, where the people, what's their background, etc. If you have that all at the click of a button, I think it's quite powerful. Simple but powerful.
It is really powerful. So, for example, if Ben and I are looking at exactly the same core information, it allows us to have a really good conversation. We're not disagreeing or having conflicting viewpoints on what the information is from the starting point, which really, we spend a lot of time thinking and trying to collect that information. So having the one point of truth really helps Ben and I and our respective teams align on actually resolving whatever issue needs to be resolved, or planning, or changing our tactics. So I think just even that, having that common source of information is a really powerful thing. And having it live as well, so having it directly, you're not waiting, having that lag of information. We see it as Ben sees it and the rest of the team, so we can all react appropriately.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the biggest values, I think, is that when you have that information live, no matter if you're in a meeting or something and you need that information real quick, you don't need to call our team to get a detailed report or anything. You just log in and it's all there anytime you need. You don't need to worry about time zones. It's all updated. So it's a real good value for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk a
little bit. The better it will get as well. You know, if Ben and I are looking from a common perspective at the information and data, if there's any shortcomings, I'm sure we'd be aligned in how we resolve that. So the more we use it, the better, and the better the tool will become as well, the more accurate and the more it will become business as usual.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about resilience and success, right? Mark, how does BP is responding to COVID-19 social distance challenges and continues to generate energy to our society?
So I am continually impressed by our people and others, to be honest, in how they have responded to COVID-19 and the challenges it's presented. It's been quite incredible, the social upheaval, how we've all felt. I mean, we're all working from home, but I am certainly, as you can see from my background. But I think it's been very impressive how the teams have responded to that. So there's kind of three things where I can kind of sort of split it down. I guess we've got the frontline people who are working in the refineries and the production facilities and the rigs. We've got the office workers like myself, and we've got suppliers working with Baker Hughes and how that works with us. So with respect to frontline staff, I mean, it's tough. So I guess you've got the usual social distancing rules that need to be applied, reduced amount of manning in quarters or staffing in quarters. You have to go as far as staggering meals, for example, to make sure the canteen's not overutilized, increased cleaning, daily temperature reading. There's a whole series of protocols which we're using offshore to try and manage that. We're minimizing the work that we're doing. We're going back to just essential staff and offshore operations. As this continues, that essential work changes, I guess. When it was a couple of weeks or the first few months, it really was very essential. As you go on, you need to do some of those maintenance tasks as well. There's a very robust process for filtering down what is essential work and how we do it. We have pre-travel screenings, which I'm sure you do as well, as people travel offshore to the rigs backwards and forwards to make sure that they're in the best physical health before they go out to minimize risks. We have a raft of quarantine protocols. We've got outbreak and medevac procedures, response plans. We've got a wealth of management work that goes around it to manage that. And to be honest, it's been working very well. We've had minimal issues globally across it, and production and operations have continued somewhat, you know, pretty well. It's been pretty robust. So I think the team's done an outstanding. It's often very difficult for people, I guess. I'm sure it's the same at Baker Hughes. Sometimes the shifts have extended out. People are in quarantine periods away from their family. And I can't thank the frontline staff enough, really. They really have. It's been difficult for them, and they've coped with it really, really well. Hopefully we've supported them, but hats off to them. They've done a really fantastic job. So that's kind of the core of our kind of operations. And to be honest, that's going pretty well. Office work as well, I guess. So we are all working from home. The office did open back in sort of probably about 40 to 60 days ago. But it's only the minimum staff going back, essential people that because of their home situation, it's need for them to go in. So I would say sort of 20 to 30% have gone back. Myself, I'm still working from home, but that opportunity is there for people. And again, one of the things that's made it successful is the digital tools that we're all using. You know, video conferencing we've got at the moment. It's really helped people connect. We're working in a different way. We're trying to do some sort of social events with folk as well, so they can feel connected, not just in a work way. We're a bit more, we're being a bit smarter with how we organize meetings and sharing information, and that's worked really well. So I'm quite impressed with how the organization and the individuals within it have responded, and we haven't seen a massive reduction in people's efficiency or effectiveness during this period, which I think that's a lot broader than BP. I think that's quite broad, in fact. And I think that is making the broader leadership team inside BP think about going forward how we're going to operate. So there's been no big announcements about that yet, but that's sort of and then working with suppliers like Baker Hughes. So we've talked for a long time about remote inspection, and we were, I guess, a bit tentative on both sides. There were risks associated that we perceived and foreseen. And COVID has pushed us to a place where it's almost been a necessity that we operate. We're on Tortue, for example, one of the regions I worked in Mauritania and Senegal. We're building with Baker Hughes are building, I guess, the manifolds and FTA structures out of a fabrication yard in Batam, and clearly we can't get people to Batam at the moment. So we have inspectors which are there, which we can work with, but we're having to manage that site remotely, where before sometimes we would have a team of people out there depending on the perceived risk. So that's really been a step change in how we've had to operate with the suppliers. Again, there's a great deal of trust there, but I think with respect to how we're operating with them, with say video links, we have got a few touch points with our inspectors, and the inspectors' role, it broadened a little bit just from quality, not just from quality to HSE. They're spotting other things and giving feedback. And with using cameras on site and being able to do remote witnessing of tests, I think globally we haven't seen a big drop in or reduction in quality or a pickup in issues. but we've had a lot less travel, a lot less, which has saved money for everybody, a lot less disruption to the manufacturing facilities. So I think in time, when things settle back, I think I would hope that we would take on probably 80 to 90% of what's currently active and keep working with that. I think there is value in going to sites, meeting people and talking about some broader issues. And I think, like going back into the office, I think we all think that and understand there are real advantages to that. But I think the days of BP and operators mobilizing big site teams to sit with Baker Hughes to check that they're doing the job, I think this is the beginning of the end of that. And it's not effective, it's not efficient. And again, if we're sharing and trusting Baker Hughes with the information that they're providing during the build for the quality issues, the progress issues, and we're looking at that inside their direct systems, we're seeing what the Baker Hughes management is seeing as well. So again, I think that whole trust relationship with the supplier is taking a major step forward during this COVID-19 step, which I think is one of the real, I mean, there's a lot of negative points about COVID-19, clearly. But with respect to the business opportunities and what we're doing here, I think I'm pleased with how people are capitalizing on this new changing world to make steps forward.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I always bring that to home. My father, he goes offshore, so I know how it is to having the time offshore plus the quarantine. It's really hard. It's really hard. And my brother also is in oil and gas, and he's in the workshop. And he's like, sometimes I really like this COVID thing just because I have much less disruptions in my workshop, right? It's less people coming here and asking questions that they could just read in a report and something like that. So I think it has your ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
So Ben, what about the solutions that Baker Hughes are bringing in to support our customers during the COVID-19? We talked a lot about digital and remote operations. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, we were faced with two immediate challenges really in COVID. One was borders were closed. We couldn't travel anymore. We couldn't send people into different places of the world. And then the second part is, but we had to continue really do the operation and not shut down operation, because it's fundamental, right, to get energy to the world. So I think what we have done, I may mention two things. One, from an offshore operational standpoint, I mentioned it earlier. We are very reliant on subject matter experts that are sometimes not from a specific country. We work in countries where oil and gas is upcoming. It's new. We don't have necessarily the expertise. So in that specific example, we couldn't get anybody into country. It took us multiple weeks to get permits in place. We ended up chartering a plane, but we could have stopped really the operation and just wait for 30 days until we have it solved, which would have cost the operator $12 million of rig downtime, all right? Or we come up with a different solution, and we had already worked on Engage Subsea Remote, so it was nothing new for us. We had the solution. We already tested the satellite connection, etc., to get a video feed. And we ended up actually deploying it immediately on that case, where we had a FSE SME team sitting in Singapore, live 24/7, supporting unexperienced FSEs to install our wellheads. We did this without any NPT, without any issues offshore, and I personally believe this is just the beginning. I think this is going to get scaled, and I think we're going to have a lot more things coming into play if you think about machine learning and artificial intelligence that we can add to that. The second piece, where we use the same solution but more in the shops and on the supplier side, is related to really the third-party witnessing or the self-inspections. This industry relies a lot on multiple checkpoints, and there are reasons for that. I think we have learned our lessons in the past. We added control points, etc. But we are spending a lot of money, right? Not only for the own inspectors and the third-party inspectors, but also all the traveling, etc. If you add carbon emission to it, we'll have a lot of emissions that are being generated in that area. But why we're doing that? I think there are solutions around this that are much more efficient and effective. And so we had a couple of cases as well over the last few months where we couldn't get anybody into country. And what we have done is basically we use the same tool to do the inspection remotely. In some cases, we have a third party witnessing it remotely. In other cases, it was the operator. In other cases, we just sent the report with the video, the screenshots, the annotations, the optical character recognition information, and the operators were really happy with the outcome. So I personally believe this is going to be a huge potential for the industry. I think there's also some interesting models around this. I don't think we need to necessarily go into always licensing fees. We could actually switch it around a little bit and say, hey, if you want to use this type of solution, why would we just not share the savings, right? We'll take 25% of the savings that are coming out, the 75% stays with the operator, and we keep investing in the solution and building it out to change the way we operate. I think there's just two examples on where we are making progress today. I think there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, agreed. So we talked a lot about the challenges and some of the solutions, how to work together. So for both of you, and I would like Mark to start, how do you think the supply chain is responding to today's challenges? You talked a little bit about what Baker Hughes is doing and how it's supporting BP, but what about the supply chain overall? How are everybody responding?
So in short, I think with respect to COVID-19, it's much better than expected. I think with respect to the oil price, I think there's still more to do. So on COVID, I mean, I guess if I look through management of people, there's been some strong boundaries set with governments about how people can move backwards and forwards in and out of countries. I think the way that the supply chain has worked within those boundaries has been exemplary. Just as Ben talked to there, it's difficult, but I don't think we could have asked for anything more. So that there is disruption, but I think people are doing a very, very good job of minimizing that disruption and maximizing output. So I'm really impressed with how we've responded to moving people around. And I guess it builds opportunities for people who are in country and local workforce as well, and gives them more opportunities to show their strengths where they may not have it before. And again, I think that's really fantastic that these folk get those opportunities. So I think there's some different positive aspects from that. With respect to the supply chain, I mean, to be honest, I see across a number of different suppliers, and I see what their disruptions have been in the global supply chain. And again, it's been pretty minimal, really. I mean, as I say, we looked across Italy at the start with respect to the forgings in China. There obviously was a set point where we weren't seeing any progress for maybe a month or so, but it's recovered fairly quickly across all of those different aspects. And we've seen it in different aspects all over the globe. So though we did see a dead spot for a month or so, we've seen it picked up quite quickly. So yes, there is a disruption, but it's not as much as I think we would have anticipated at the start. So that's pretty good. With respect to manufacturing, assembly, and I mean, I guess Ben can talk about as Baker Hughes could do better than I, but globally we've seen, I guess, some preliminary issues which were mostly around getting people, and sometimes where government actually shut down the facilities. So obviously they were shut for that maybe 30 to 60 days, so we had a dead spot there. But when the facilities have opened back up, even if it's not been operating at 100%, well, to be honest, I think within probably 40 to 60 days, most of the facilities I could see across our different operators were 80 to 90% effective. So it's been quite a strong response and rebound back from manufacturing from what I can see in my position. And logistics with respect to air freight, shipping, getting things through customs as well. Again, speaking to Baker Hughes and others, I think they've got a very good handle on where the pinch points are globally with respect to that, and they're managing it very well. So COVID, as I say, it's much better than I would have anticipated or forecast. It's not chaotic, it's structured, well managed. There is impacts, but I think people understand and are managing around them. So that I would say was good. With respect to the oil price, I mean, it's going to take the industry a bit longer to, as I say, I think we need to move the whole cost basis and reduce that in order to us be more competitive with the other projects which are going ahead. And I think that's going to need to be fundamental changes. As I say, I think as operators, we need to work together to agree standardization. I think it's so important that Baker Hughes could basically produce a standard product line. And yes, there would be different configurations, but the building blocks could be common. And that allows companies like Baker Hughes to build scale, to pre-invest in order to bring the cost down and reduce the speed at which they can produce them. So I think there's some real alignment work we need to do as an industry in order to make a step change in that price element, and build that scale up as well. So if we're focusing on specific hubs, then some levels the scale reduces. So if we join together, then we can build that scale up as an industry, which we need to reduce the price. And then I guess what I see we reorganizing to reduce costs. I see that inside BP, other operators, and with a lot of suppliers. And that's uncertain for a lot of people, uncertainty with respect to their jobs. And as people lose jobs, obviously there's still quite a large amount of work to be done. So I think there's a lot of anxiety around that. And I guess we haven't got the answer to that yet. We can see what's going on. And hopefully we're not losing the expertise that we need. But what it certainly does drive is the need to be more efficient. It certainly needs to drive for the operators to redraw that line where we interface with the supplier. We can't duplicate efforts. We need to be more efficient. We need to trust each other. We need to understand that what's important is, as an industry, it's important that both the operators and the supply chain work our way through this. We need to do it together, otherwise we won't manage to do it. So that's what I see there. There's definitely more work to do. But I think as I speak to other people in the industry, I think that is starting to land. I think people's ideas are starting to converge, and I think that understanding is growing. So what we now need to do with that is galvanize it and turn it into an output and an action, really. And yeah, that's the area of focus for a lot of people in the leadership team, which I work in, and more broadly. And so there's a lot of energy in there to try and make that more efficient. And I think it will necessarily happen with the reorganization, because we'll have less people on both sides. So we will necessarily need to be more effective.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. I would like you to follow up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I agree with Mark 100% on what he said. I think maybe a couple of things to add from my point of view on the COVID situation. I'm just amazed really by how resilient this industry has been. And specifically also my services team, right? If I look at that, people were worried, right? Had fears about themselves, family, friends, and everybody kept going, right? And delivered for customers, communities, and we had field service engineers that were offshore in foreign countries for 100 days and more away from their families, right? Which is just really, really impressive. The employees in the shop kept working, kept doing repair work and upgrade work, and then the entire infrastructure behind it that supports work remotely while figuring out childcare and homeschooling and a lot of other things, right? And I personally had to deal with a 2-year-old, couldn't go to nursery, and my wife and I both working, had to figure out how to do this. And I'm sure a lot of other people had to do this too. So really impressed. I think our regional footprint helped us, and it played a huge part in running operations smoothly. While we had some limited impact in some countries, we could shift things around where we needed to. And we kept running almost in every facility 100% or a little bit less, depending on staffing levels. But I think we did the best and didn't have really a lot of impact on that front. For our supply chain base, we work with all the vendors, and even, I mean, some vendors in places like China or Italy that were earlier impacted than others. I think we worked very closely together, helped each other out with kind of this critical industry support. And we kept delivering, and we then leveraged that in other places. So I think being a global company with a regional footprint helped a lot in that. The digital side of things, obviously, as mentioned before, also did its part. And I think on the oil price, I agree with Mark. I think we really need to challenge the cost base. I think we need to continue to standardize. I think we need to challenge the status quo. We want to keep a seat at the energy transition table, and we need to do our part, and we're going to compete. And I think it's about time that we approach this with really an open mind. We leverage maybe some of the experience that we have today, but we bring in some fresh perspectives that maybe doesn't have the experience about our industry, and that can have a great dialogue with maybe the subject matter experts to challenge on how we're going to do this going forward. And I think then we're going to come to an outcome that is competitive, that is really helping from an energy transition standpoint and is addressing the climate change issue. And I think there's a lot more we can give as an industry, and I'm sure we will.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So we got a good question from our audience, Mark, that I really think that fits well into this question that we just answered. So people are asking, what advice would you give to the vendor base on how to improve even more how we collaborate on new solutions and ways of working?
So I would, if I was a vendor, I think I would be stronger with the operators around what your product offering is. I think there's real value. I think you're very well placed to work across operators, as long as we're listening. And I know I am, and I know the rest of my organization is. And I think, to be honest, the industry is starting to listen. I think if Baker Hughes could, and I know you already have, to be honest, have a compelling product offer, and we can align on those common core elements across industry. I know there's configuration and I know there's complexity around that, but I think that being said, I think it's really important that Baker Hughes is strong with what their product offering. These are the products, these are the different configurations you can have. We are going to go rental tools, or these are the tools that we're going to offer with this. This is our product offering. If you want anything different from that operator, it's bespoke. It comes with it takes longer, it requires more engineering. If you go with these standards, you can use a configurator, the end output is more effective, efficient. So my advice there would be to play stronger in that space. I mean, to be honest, to play stronger, you need to have a compelling solution, don't get me wrong. So, and I understand that as I talk to the other suppliers, the solutions as they are being developed. So you may have a subsection of your product which is complete and other sections which are not. I think we need to understand that and the time frame for those product developments to be fully fleshed out, because I think otherwise that undermines sometime or creates confusion. But for the products which are fully engineered and configured, I think you really need to promote those, say what they can do, what they can't do, and kind of push those. When I reflect upon some of the how do I put it? Some of the opportunities I see across suppliers, it's quite difficult to see the value of that standardization coming through, both in cost and lead time. So I would love to because there's compromise. If we go with standardization, there's compromises for the operator. But if that compromise comes with a quicker pace and a lower cost, we will be willing to make that. So my advice to the suppliers, have a strong product line, push the operators to align, and I certainly hope to listen. But we do need to connect the value to it as well. We do need to see the value of that compromise across the operator. But I think that would be fantastic if we could get that.
Yeah, I really appreciate your advice. And wow, the time really flies by. So Mark, we have time for one last question. And I see BP being very vocal about energy transition. And I truly believe it's a big transformation with high expectations. So let's talk about the future. How do you see the industry in the next 10 years?
That's a very good question. It's difficult. So I mean, I guess I'd probably safer to stay within subsea rather than going truly global. I mean, if I talked about BP as a company, I think there really is, and as you say, our recent announcement, we really are making a very different play from an oil company to an energy company. And with that, as I talked about, the competition for capital, now we will be with renewable projects, with carbon capture and storage, with blue hydrogen options, with EV charging stations. So there's that world of the future, which is tangible, apparent, and I think definitely will happen. But looking towards subsea, which is clearly what we're talking about today, I guess what will I see in the next 10 years? I say very much focus. So I think there'll be less development, more focus within existing basins. I think when it's a standardization, if we could come to a supplier and pick from a catalog of discrete options, work inside Baker Hughes systems, and you guys configure and us sort of purchase and go through that. And as Ben talked to, total cost of ownership and more outcome based, I think we will necessarily make those steps over the next 3 to 5 years, I think. And so, and I think that will be good. I think that it will change what we do slightly on both sides of the fence, but I think that will create real opportunities. And I think we will need to do that as part of the industry. And as Ben talks too eloquently about sharing digital and sharing data digitally, I think that's a foundation for that. I think it really helps us communicate backwards and forwards. It helps us build trust. If we share production data back with companies like Baker Hughes, you get real-time feedback on your products, which enables you to improve them, enables you to predict and help us predict failures. It helps us with our sparing, which is lost capital to us. So if we're in a position where Baker Hughes can say, well, we can predict a failure is going to happen in the next 6 months, therefore we're going to build you a replacement from stock, it means that BP won't have had to spend the $10 million at the start of the project to hold all of that stock in place. And if you can aggregate that data across suppliers, across operators, and normalize the data, then of course you're looking at the data from a much bigger pool. So your ability to predict will improve dramatically as well. So I think digital tools, ordering from a catalog, sharing information a lot more openly between operator and supplier, I think will really help both ways.
Okay, Ben, what about you? What your crystal ball says?
I don't have one. No, look, I think Mark is raising the right topics. I think the industry has a lot of ideas. I think there's a lot of other industries out there that have maybe implemented some things that we can learn. Maybe I'll just share 3 ideas I have. One is really, I think additive manufacturing is gonna really enter its way into oil and gas, and it will change the game from a productivity and carbon emission standpoint. Just imagine in 5 years or so, you need a spare part, and you just go to a 20-foot container that has an iPad on the side, and you click on it and say, I need this spare part in 5 minutes, and it prints it for you. Or if you don't have the space offshore, you just have a drone deliver it from the service base nearby, right? I think that's gonna come, and I think it's gonna change the way from a cost standpoint. Another area is really on machine learning and artificial intelligence. We're already doing quite a lot on this today. We're going to have much more automated or human-supported decisions happening in the future. It's going to change the game from a safety standpoint, but also it will reduce non-productive time and will make operations much safer, cleaner, and faster. And then lastly, I would say probably the way we do inspections in the industry will change. I think it's going to become more autonomous. Less ROVs and vessels potentially, and then I think there's going to be less people interaction, and then some of the simpler intervention scope might just become an Uber service where an Uber comes by and just brings the spare parts and swaps it out with a robot or something autonomously versus maybe today doing a lot of intervention work and manually. Just a couple of ideas.
Yeah, we're excited about the future, right? So I really appreciate this. Has been great. Our time is now over. So this has been amazing. I want to thank Ben and Mark for this great session. I always like this interaction. I think it's because I really miss everything being in the office. So please remember that you can still navigate in our digital solutions fair and dive into Subsea. Check our equipment, our solutions. It's a great resource if you want to learn about a little bit more what we are doing, what are our solutions. Thank you for joining us today. And we hope to see you in the next sessions where Carl and Chelsea will present Baker Hughes disruptive thinking around intervention solutions. And after that, I'll be back with Alex and Asal that they will elaborate on our digital platform, Engage Subsea, and how we're keeping projects going and collaborating with customers. In our last session of the day, Christina and Paul will talk about flow assurance, production chemistry, making a marginal field economical. So I hope you keep connected with us. I thank you very much for Ben and Mark for this great session, and I see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.